Today.
Welcome to Purdue Crop Chat, a regular podcast from Hoosier Ag Today and the Purdue University Extension Service, featuring Purdue Extension soybean specialist Dr. Shaun Casteel and Extension corn specialist Dr. Dan Quinn. On this episode, Shaun and Dan discuss the August USDA Crop Report, the first official estimate of the size of the U.S. corn and soybean crops. And they do it live from the Indiana State Fairgrounds. This podcast is made possible by the Indiana Corn Marketing Council and Indiana Soybean Alliance. Your Indiana corn and soybean checkoff investments yesterday are paying off today. New research, new uses, demand creation, bringing dollars back to the farm. Check it out at yourcheckoff.org. Now your host for Purdue Crop Chat, Hoosier Ag Today's Eric Pfeiffer.
We are here at the Purdue Extension Building, the Indiana State Fairgrounds. We are live. Well, we're live if you're here with us. You are still recorded if you're listening on the podcast, the Purdue Crop Chat at HoosierAgToday.com or wherever you listen to podcasts. Eric Pfeiffer here. Dan Quinn here to my left. Hello, Dan.
Hey, Eric.
Soybean Shaun Casteel over there, farther to my left. Hello, Shaun.
Howdy, Eric.
And we welcome a guest today. Purdue Ag economist Chad Fiechter is with us here today. Hello, welcome.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming all the way down here to the fairgrounds. We appreciate that. And we've got a lot to talk about today that's kind of right in your wheelhouse, this whole ag economy thing. You've got some insight here, some really great news to pass along to us, right?
He's a long-term listener, first-time visitor, so he's deer in headlights now. What are we going to do?
Long-time listener, first-time caller? Is that okay? Perfect. So we've got a lot to go through today, and we do appreciate those joining us on YouTube, Facebook, all the places. Thank you for doing that. You guys didn't get the memo. We were shirt and tie for today.
Is this the first time that you've done this? I've never seen this.
Come on now.
Never. It's been flip-flops, shorts, and a T-shirt. I mean, really.
Well,
that's your A game. So what is this?
Well, this is how we do it. Okay. I kind of liken this. I went to a Matchbox 20 concert a few years back, and
Dan, do you know who that is?
Yeah,
I do.
You're familiar with that?
Good.
I'm not crazy. I'm just a little unwell.
The two over here might be good with that one.
Okay.
It's like we wish we were there.
So, like the opening act, you know, like so it was. It was the Counting Crows. You guys know? Do you know the Counting Crows? Okay. So they were the opening act, but the ones that went on before them, it was actually the guitarist for Matchbox 20, and he sang a little bit. Okay. So like he's in the big show, okay, but he's also the opening act. That's like me today. So we have the lieutenant governor debate happening a little bit later on. So I'm in the big show, but I'm not like hosting that thing. So I've got to get a little dressed up.
Can you ask them what they think of the Purdue Crop Chat podcast?
I will ask them that. That'll be my first question.
Yeah.
So then my follow-up question is, who are we then in that analogy of
opener
Matchbox
to the opener?
Yes.
We are getting the tickets to get into that show.
You are the opener to the opener. But I'm like the guitarist for Matchbox 20 that no one knows. I'm not Rob Thomas, but I'm the guitarist.
At least you're on the stage and not outside performing like we are right here.
Absolutely.
Okay.
You guys get in the cheap seats. I get a seat up front. So, but anyway, let's talk about this USDA report that came out on Monday. We've got some numbers to go through, and again, I think I start my annual campaign of getting Indiana Beach to change their slogan. There's more than corn in Indiana. Sorry, Dan. That's not the standard anymore. There's more than soybeans in Indiana. We need to come up with something a bit more catchy, though.
Hey, you'd say, where's the corn? Where's the beef?
Yeah,
where's the corn?
Where is the corn? Everybody's moving to soybeans now. A lot more soybeans in Indiana this year. Sorry, I've got to look at my phone. I'm not that professional that I can memorize all these numbers. There's a lot of numbers in here. In Indiana, farmers are anticipating record high corn and soybean yields this year. Let's go through the corn numbers first. This according to USDA NASS. Yield, your numbers were low. All these numbers that I keep asking you for, and you kept going pretty conservative, Dan. 207 bushels per acre is what USDA is projecting at this point That's up 4 bushels from the record last year that we had. Total production forecasted 1.05 billion bushels. Okay, down 3% from last year. We're anticipating harvesting 5.06 million acres this year. That's down 250,000 acres from 2023. If we look on the soybean side, 62 bushels per acre. That's higher than what you've been projecting, Shaun.
Now, I do want to say, on record, I've been saying 61. Dan, yesterday, before we looked at the crop report, what number did I give you?
61.
I did not.
62?
I gave you 62, dead on.
He said 62.
He said 62? Okay. Well, he wasn't, I mean, he was too chicken to give it on this podcast. I mean, come on. Don't give him too much credit.
Clearly, he lied twice. So.
Yeah. Total production forecast at 358 million bushels, up 7% from last year. 5.78 million acres of soybeans, up 300,000 acres from 2023. So, more soybeans than corn. Dan, what say you to that?
It might change after Chad talks about the prices of beans.
Ouch.
The first thing off the top, acreage is down in terms of corn, but you look at yields, right? Yields are, I still gave them props, saying it was going to be a state record year. I didn't say it was going to be 207, but 204. But 207, right, that's a state record. Looking at the data, right, Indiana, I think 3 of the last 4 years have had state record yields in the state. And you look at last...
And you're here to take credit for all of that,
yes,
right?
Yeah, when did you arrive again?
On my tenure document, right front and center. But you look at since 2019, every single year has been above trend. We've had state records out of 3 of the last 4 years. Even, I think it was 22. It wasn't state record, but it's still 190, in terms of state yield averages. So it wasn't like it was, a disaster year that year. It's still good year, still above trend. But 207 is excellent. That really just does a good job of equating what we see around the state. You look at the crop condition ratings from the USDA. This whole year we've hovered around high 60s, 70% good to excellent. Every other year, 2018 was that way, 21. Some of these other years where we've hovered around that 70% good to excellent across the majority of the year, that's been a state record year or state record yield year for that particular year. But again, you look at one thing I did notice in terms of the rainfall, right? We've had a really good crop. I would say we're not above average in rainfall. We're about average or actually a little bit below. But it comes to the timeliness of the rainfall. And we've seen this the last couple of years. I was looking at the crop condition ratings and how they've kind of trended the last couple of years is that they'll start, 60, 70% good to excellent. And there's always, at least the last couple of years, kind of a little bit of a dip. Right? They'll dip kind of in June. The last few Junes have been dry. And in terms of corn, we're looking really at that July, right? In July, for the last 3 years, you see that condition rating kind of actually tick up. And that's just been a proponent of the rainfall. We've caught right at pollination for this crop. We've had outstanding kernel numbers. We've had outstanding kernel set. A lot of the crop has looked pretty healthy. Been driving around the state the last couple of weeks. I mean, you just see how good a lot of this crop is. There's pockets that had challenges in terms of flooding and maybe got delayed planting and stuff. But it's outstanding the way the crop looks. We won't talk about Illinois. I fell out of my chair when I saw their numbers as well. But
nothing good comes out of Illinois. You got to remember that.
Tell me about it.
I wanted to throw one thing. Illinois 225 for state average is just ridiculous. But look at that state, right? Their whole, I always argue with Illinois people that Indiana is not like Illinois. We have a little tiny pocket of those soils in the state. It's a very small percentage of the state that has what Illinois has. You drive over to Illinois, it's black, and it's multiple feet of topsoil over there. The fact that Indiana, we have just a small percentage of those soils. We have a lot more forest-based soils. I would say a lot more challenging environments in this state. We're still able to push them a little bit. We've been pushing Iowa in the last couple of years in terms of yield averages for the state. It's just, a reflection of, one, how outstanding the crop has been, how kind of fortunate we've been in terms of timeliness of rainfall. Planting progress has been good the last couple of years as well. So it's been pretty eye opening, and for me, it makes me feel good that seeing a lot of good corn around the state.
I think what you also meant to add is that, we have pretty good managers of those crops.
course.
That's what you forgot to mention. Shaun, what do you say about these soybeans and where we're at? I mean, obviously we've got more acres,
Yep.
and we're going to talk about the prices of those soybeans here in a minute, like Dan mentioned. But
Sure.
right now we've got a pretty good looking crop.
We've got an outstanding looking crop, and when we look at soybeans, it goes back to the start of the season. We've talked about planting progress, timely planting. Dan and I always have this debate on which crop to plant first, and the obvious answer is soybean, right? But I think that mindset has been around for the last 5-10 years, and I think it's really playing out, right? You talked about, Dan, in terms of state record yields on the corn. Soybeans, it's been 2016, 2018, 2020, 2021, I believe, and the 22 dropped off a little bit. So every one of those have had a great stand establishment, timely planting. Not every one of them has been early, but this 24 season has just been right on that line that we've had timely planting. A lot of the crop got out. Chad and I had lunch and enjoyed a good garbage burger and pit potatoes and talked to the guy.
So good.
Oh, it was. And he's actually from down Crawfordsville. I said, how's the crop looking? He said, phenomenal, right? I mean, you even made the comment that it's like, for a farmer to say that?
That's rare.
Yeah, so it is. It's a phenomenal looking crop. And so I think we've got a crop that's definitely out there. It's got the timely rains when we needed it. June, Grandpa always talked about, I'd rather have a dry June than a dry August. And so we're halfway through August. Hopefully we catch a few of the rains that are coming, because if we do turn dry, we can knock a little bit off. We can take some sprinkles off the cake. But right now, the cake has been set. We've got some good icing on it, and it looks good.
And for those enjoying the state fair, I think that today looks good, tomorrow looks good. Later on in the week, we've got some rain coming. So
we need it.
Yeah, we've got some rain
to finish
moving
the
in.
crop.
Yeah.
All the years that I've done this, and the crop report comes out, and it's kind of a tough call for me on the soybean front, right? These numbers are based on, okay, the plants that are out there. Usually with the USDA, they haven't got any pod counts at this point, right? When you come to September, they've got pod counts. And so I've always been a little tongue-in-cheek with these reports, but golly, this crop this year, we've bloomed as early as I've ever seen. So we were blooming in early June. We've got pod set that's a good 7 to 10 days ahead. So we've got pods that are out there filling out right now, R5. So we are in a great place. Long days of sunlight, good temperatures. We're packing on 3 or 4 bushels per acre per day.
Yeah, and the corn side, I was looking. We're actually a little bit ahead on the corn side, about 11% dented right now. That's a few percentage points. I think 5-year average is about 5% dented. We were only about 1% dented last year. We talk about last year in terms of temperature, growing degree day accumulation. We're just a little bit behind last year. Had a little bit more challenging harvest last year in terms of being delayed, especially as you get to the northern part of the state. This year, I tend to lean towards maybe that won't be as much of an issue. You look at growing degree day accumulation for the state is actually ahead in a lot of the areas of the state, anywhere from 100 to 300 growing degree days ahead in many different parts of the state. The crop progress, the growth stage we're in, the denting, right, that is a little bit ahead of the 5-year average and last year. So I'm, a little bit hopeful that maybe harvest maybe a little bit sooner, but maybe a little bit more timely this year. But again, like Shaun said, right, so with corn, we're in grain fill, and grain fill is something we've learned the last few years, and is that you can have pretty large swings in yields with grain fill, right? We talk about, we pull ears, they look good, the kernel numbers are there, hey, my ears are good, it's set. Well, there's still a lot of time left to go. As we get into dent stage, that's still about 30 days away from maturity. There's still about beginning dent, still about 90% dry matter left to go to be accumulated in those kernels. So that's, a lot of things can swing those yields in terms of the grain fill. But you look at the temperatures, right? We're moderate right now. I think cooler temperatures are good. If we can catch some of this rainfall here towards the end of the week, you need to have a conversation with your meteorologist to turn that switch on for us if we can. But again, it's setting up really good. Just catch a little bit more moisture, keep these temperatures a little bit more moderate. can finish out the crop pretty strong.
So then, Dan, is there anything that is a concern to finish this crop? We talked a lot about weather. So we had Darcy on a few times ago, and diseases were ramping up. Tar spot came in as early as it's ever been. It came in June. So I mean, what's the story there?
Yeah, I think tar spot came in early, and then it really kind of halted for a little bit. We had a dry period kind of in June. It started to get a little bit dry on us. And then July, we caught some rainfall. We're a little bit of concern, with the rainfall and humidity throughout July. Disease was picking up. We were noticing that in a lot of our trials and working with a lot of farmers across the state. So disease has picked up, but at least from my perspective, it hasn't got to the point where it's been, an eyebrow raising, like, okay, it's getting into that ear leaf and above. We're really looking at, okay, what's the health of the leaf at the ear? And what's the health of that upper canopy? A lot of that new disease has come in. It's been primarily focused in the lower portion of the canopy. I would also say farmers have done a great job in terms of, one, watching for the diseases and managing the diseases. I had a lot of phone calls. Darcy had a lot of phone calls. We had a lot of conversations back and forth with a lot of farmers around the state saying, hey, should I go? Should I not go? Oh, okay, I'm going to keep watching in a couple more days. And I think I'm going to go or I'm not going to go. So it gives you an indication that they're watching it really closely and paying attention to it. But again, I think, some of the temperatures, not just the cool temperatures, but it's kind of, dried off a little bit, I would say the last few weeks, and that could probably hold some of it at bay. But that is a concern, right? There's always going to be pockets. There's areas that we did notice that the diseases were moving. Tar spot, northern corn leaf blight, some areas in the southern part of the state that had southern rust come in. Gray leaf spot was coming in. So in terms of yield limiting factors, there's probably some pockets that maybe disease could impact. And then, if we miss some of these rains, right, that's also the challenge as corn gets to that maturity in that black layer. We saw a little bit of it last year in pockets where we had a really hot period. I think it was early September last year where it came in. Got really hot and dry, and then that early senescence happened where we actually saw upper canopy senescence in the crop. So anything that, I always say with grain fill in corn, we just want it to go slow, right? We don't want it too slow. We saw some of that last year.
All right, hey, Chad, this is where he becomes the diva again. Okay, if you haven't heard him he talks about this crop needing all these things. So it needs to go slow. It needs to have moderate temperatures.
But not too
wait.
slow.
Not too slow.
It's got to be at the right pace.
Yeah, but I guess this is how he's gotten state record corn. He's like, you're the weather whisperer.
Yeah, you got to talk to it a little bit. Maybe.
I think you even dance for it, don't you?
Can't have it too hot. Can't have it too cold.
To it.
A little bit of rainfall.
Dances to it.
So that's a lot of this
Dancing Queen.
This crop,
Quinn.
right? We talk to it. A lot of. Yeah. We spend a lot of time with it, nurture it as it gets to maturity, as you would say as a parent.
But if disease does come in at this point, I mean, really, in all intents and purposes, it's advanced. You're really not going to get any yield hit or very little at all, right?
Correct. Yeah. So the pathologists and a lot of the work they've done, it's usually R4 when they. If you have disease moving up to the ear leaf at R4 and pushing R5, a fungicide's not going to do anything.
I don't know, corn. What's R4?
R4 would be the dough stage. Okay. So best way to do it, pull your ear. I always stick my fingernail into that kernel, right? R3 is milk. If you push your fingernail in
pop it, and you get
the milk in your eye. Dough, right? It's not dented, so dent is really pretty easy to see.
I got that one. That's R5,
see
right?
the dent.
Okay.
But if you put your fingernail in there and that starch is starting to harden, that's that R4 stage.
That's good.
So usually I've had a lot of conversations with even some agronomists and farmers this week that have asked me, hey, do you think we should spray? But I'm pushing R5 and dent, and I just say, no, you're probably not going to get any benefit out of that. And
that's
you're probably
the one
not
way that he saves some money.
Yeah.
The one way.
The one way. And also the fact that if you do have disease come in and it may look like it got worse as you get to harvest, it's probably not going to have much of an impact on that crop at that point in time.
Now, Shaun, I'm looking around to see if there are any State Fair employees or Cindy Hoy around here somewhere, because you've been talking about this State Fair disease in soybeans.
They've yet to take my petitions to actually have posters of it and everything, right?
State Fair disease.
The State Fair disease.
Not SDS, SFD.
Boy, you thought quick on that one.
That was dangerous.
Live and thinking, whoa, what is this? The state fair disease.
State fair disease.
I often talk about
Yes.
sudden death syndrome of soybeans. So it being the state fair disease. So normally we look at August to September is whenever we really see this disease express itself. It's a disease that infects soybeans whenever it's early growth, so vegetative growth, even some of the germination process when it's cool and wet, right? Those conditions. So we certainly had some of those with some of the April plantings. We even had guys, we were down in Posey County a few weeks ago, had some March 28th planted beans, and so SDS was actually showing up before the state fair, but it's really about the stage of growth and development. So we're at R5 on soybeans, so that's where you have a seed that's about 1/8 of an inch long in the pod, and it starts to express itself now whenever you have a lot of seed fill going on. And so whenever it starts to dry out a little bit, that toxin, if it did infect early on, starts to clog basically the vascular tissue. And so you start to see this interveinal chlorosis and necrosis, so yellowing and browning of the leaves. It is showing up a little bit here and there, but often I talk about that it's showing up probably actually lines up with some really good yielding beans. So a lot of times it's the ones that we planted earlier, timely planting. We've got a lot of draw on that plant. We have a lot of photosynthates that really need to go in and pack in those beans and make big beans. And so it's starting to show up. I wouldn't call it bad or severe right now. I also want to at least raise awareness to this, that symptomology. So when you look between the veins, if they're yellow or brown, that's SDS. It could also be brown stem rot, and then last couple of years we've seen a new disease that come in, red crown rot. So those three diseases actually show the same leaf symptomology. So if you guys are windshield scouting, you see that, get out and at least understand what you have is kind of where I'm at on it.
I still don't think they'd much care for you calling it the state fair disease.
No, I don't think so. I don't think so.
Yeah.
Especially if then you say sudden death syndrome, right?
Yeah, I think Cindy Hoy might permanently ban you from the fair. Well,
Maybe.
Yeah.
No potatoes for me.
Yeah. So we've talked a lot of agronomy thus far, and we've left Chad out of the conversation. Let's bring him in now because we need to talk about some of the economics of all of this before we get into the report. First off, for those who may not know who you are, why don't you introduce yourself for some of our audience here, because this is you are a first time person on the Purdue Crop Chat. Let's let folks know who you are first. So introduce yourself for everyone, Chad.
Okay, yeah. So I'm a first-year professor in Ag Econ, but the story that I think my colleagues are really tired of hearing is that I'm from Indiana and I farmed for 10 years before having a midlife crisis and going back to grad school. So I like to consider myself a recovering farmer. And I think if we're going to talk about this specific conversation, like I'm playing the role of the people I feared as a farmer. So like I'm trying to think about on the fly, how do I change the narrative a little bit? Because in economics, we think pretty simple in supply and demand, and you've made some pretty compelling arguments that the supply side seems pretty rosy. So I think as I was sitting here thinking, in economics, we can be utility maximizers or profit maximizers. And so I think farmers are going to need to lean into their utility maximizing function as much as possible and really enjoy that they produced a good crop. The profit maximizing side might be a little challenging this year. But I don't want to be the gloom and doom. You guys got to talk about diseases.
That's why I invited you in, right?
Okay. It seems tough.
It's a little gloom and doom right now. We have a demand problem right now, it seems. There just aren't very many options, and we can touch on it from a number of different ways. I was out in D.C. recently with our corn and soybean growers, talking with the staff of our congressmen and our senators. I mean, they're pushing for more ways to use things. They want more biofuels policies. They want a number of different things to push these things. It's tough right now. They're looking for more ways to use their corn and soybeans. We're just not coming up with many right now.
Yeah, I mean, we're coming off of. I mean, both of you said how many years are we doing records in Indiana in corn?
3 of the last 4.
And how many in soybeans?
Yeah, I mean, we're in the same years plus another year before that. So, 4 out of the 5.
I mean, that really tells it's simple, right? We farmers have followed the mandate to produce. We've done really well at that. We just really haven't introduced new ways to use them up. And so when you have that and you have those big crops, it's tough, the market responds to that. So we don't hope for a disaster, but we need something new, right? We need something new to come into the market to kind of set things back to where I think people would be happier.
Yeah. With what we're looking at right now, I just did a market report a little while ago today. It was interesting. I saw a headline last week. CJ Miller is here manning one of the cameras here today, and I was talking with him about it. I think the headline was, $14 soybeans. When are we going to see those again? I'm like, gosh, guys, I'm more worried about getting down under $10. And here we are today after the USDA report on Monday, and here we are, new crop soybeans are down under $10. It seems to me like we're just playing a really bad game of limbo with these soybean markets. It really is a game of how low can we go right now, and where is this level of support? After this USDA report yesterday, is that the game we're playing right now?
Oh man, that's a tough question. Yeah, I think so. Right, we're trying to figure out where does this settle out. The good thing is when we have cheap prices, that means that the demand probably will increase. How much we can flex that demand increase in the livestock or even in the ethanol sector, and that's positive. We can move the needle there. However, it's limited. It's limited without kind of a new sort of demand coming in.
I think about whenever we had the conversation a few years ago, and nitrogen prices were near $1 a pound. And so, you talk about this input that comes into this, and we had a lot of the ideas, okay, are we going to go to the soybean away from the corn? And I haven't looked at every year the last few years, but we definitely have had more of the tinge leaning toward. We're nearly 5.8 million acres on soy this year, 5.1 on corn. So I wonder if that might come into play, Chad, that the idea that, okay, yeah, there's a lot of inputs that go into that diva crop, but is it at a point now that we might want to switch back a few more acres to the corn front?
Put that on recording, please.
I mumbled that one. I said maybe, might, right? To get things to be profitable in that. Who knows? That's not my area, but it's just a general thought as an agronomist.
Yeah, I think there's probably potential, as we're, I hate to say the word losses, but the losses on soybeans are less than they will be in corn again this year. So even those prices where we're at. Sure. So that's a tough thing to talk about, because we're on the negative side, saying where are you trying to minimize kind of the damage that's been done. So I don't know. I'm not sure how many of those acres will do the switch. I think hopefully as we come into the spring, we get a new look on, what's the next crop going to look like? Where are we at on cost of production? But yeah, there could be some switching back. Yeah.
Well, I think that as growers, knowing that last year, bin busting crop, right? You've got to have in the back of your mind. Again, you grew up family farm as well as farming yourself. And I grew up family farm. The idea is like, okay, not every year is going to be a bin busting year, or not every year is going to be the most profitable. So you have to make those long range decisions. So what kind of things, have our farmers made those decisions and look to make those long term decisions in the coming 2 to 3 years?
Yeah, that's a good. So I'm always thinking about that idea that, as you're sitting in traffic and the lane beside you is going really fast and the lane that you're in is going really slow, and then everybody switches to the fast lane and everybody switches back, and then you basically just do this back and forth, and oftentimes you're just better off staying in the lane. Sometimes I wonder about that with crop plans. You might have some short-term switching, but
sure.
As a farmer having that long-term view, unfortunately, if you're farming, you might only have 50, 60 crops that you're going to grow, but trying to stay consistent, don't panic. Try to make sound decisions, knowing that you can't control the markets. Hopefully get some joy out of the fact you grew a big crop,
sure.
And then live to fight again another day.
Yeah, and so probably staving down the new iron envy that might be going on or anything like that might come to mind.
Yeah, I think you guys got your jobs cut out for you on how do we grow good crops with the least amount of inputs. That's probably going to be the conversation, right? It seems like we've had a phase of really kind of exploring and trying some new stuff and spending on fertility. Maybe this next year is a year where we say, hey, what's the least amount? Where can we hit that marginal revenue, marginal cost, where we're getting getting back what we put in at least. Let's not go any further. So maybe stay away from
Yeah,
the green paint.
We kind of noticed that this year, especially, fungicide time in corn. It was, every other day I was having phone calls, and I know Darcy was having a lot of phone calls as well. Just, almost, just talking the farmer through it, right? And we didn't have that, the last couple of years, when you had, $7+ corn.
You just do it.
Yeah,
it's not a question. You just do it.
This year it was a question. And it was, some of those fungicides, it's 30, 40,
Yeah,
$40+
it's pricey.
an acre, right? It's a financial decision. So we had to talk with a lot of farmers through those decisions. And there's some farmers that, we probably need to pull the trigger, but I had quite a few conversations with the farmers that, actually held off in terms of, right, you made that point, being as efficient as you can with your inputs, and it comes into just watching things as close as you can to make those decisions. We always talk about scouting your fields and knowing what's going on out in those fields and making those informed decisions where, hey, that disease is hanging in that lower canopy. I'm at this growth stage, right? I probably don't really need it. I'm probably not going to see the benefit from it. Or if I do see a little bit of a yield hit, it's still not going to pay for the cost of that product. And you're probably going to see a lot of those, you see a lot of different foliar sprays and micronutrients and those the different type of products that may be, highly variable where you see responses, or might be very minimal, where maybe a lot of those start to get cut out for some farmers. That's why we always talk about having those check strips out in your field. That's always the best way. Just shut the sprayer off for a little bit, shut the applicator off for a little bit, or just shutting, starter on planters, right? Just shut that off for a little bit and use your yield monitor to take a look at, it doesn't have to be a full-fledged replicated research trial that we do, but leave a strip out there and say to yourself, did that product really give me much of a benefit? Or if it gave me a little bit of benefit, did it really pay for the cost of that product? So, we see this, it's ebbs and flows of ag in the commodity world. You see, a lot more aggressiveness in what we're going to apply when the prices go up, prices go down, we get a little bit more conservative, paying attention to things, and really trying to apply what we need and when we need it.
Is it that, and this might be a dumb question, and
You're good for those.
I know,
learned,
and
right?
you can say there's no such thing as dumb questions, just dumb people who ask questions.
It's self-proclaimed. He talks about this.
I know.
So it's not me just throwing punches here.
It's just, yeah. Thank you for the commentary, Andy Eubank, sitting off camera. But how different is it when, as a farmer, when you stop, I guess trying to make that distinction of farming for yield versus farming for profit, and trying to distinguish between the two, because again, in good times, it's like that's the same thing,
Right.
but in not so great times, like right now, it's certainly not.
Yeah, it's it's tough, right? And one thing I notice, farmers are competitive. They're competitive with themselves. They're competitive with their neighbors, right? They love pushing that crop to the max, and
it's fun too,
and
right?
it's
Let's
fun,
go ahead and say.
right?
I mean,
Yeah.
I get right
It's
in there
fun.
too, right?
We have a lot of those conversations with the farmers, right? It's, I have some of the conversations where how can I be more profitable? I would say the majority of my conversations are how can I push it a little bit more, right? And they're competitive, and that's their livelihood. That's what they love doing, is pushing that crop to the max. But again, on the flip side of that, you do have to be careful with that. And some of these inputs are expensive. And if you're, there's farmers that do not just one fungicide, it's 2, it's 3, right? And do you really need that? You could probably still produce an outstanding crop without some of these additional inputs, and still had, your profitability was much higher, and you're still getting that good crop. So that's often the challenge that, us as agronomists, we're trying to do is, one, produce that really good crop, but be as efficient as we can and only apply what we need in terms of targeted input applications when we need it, based on these fields and these environments and my own operation, and targeting those yield limiting factors that are out there. But again, it's, they want to push it. They're competitive, and that's what they're after.
The idea of pushing it and getting the yield, that's an easy sell.
Yep.
It's the idea of pushing it and not getting the yield response.
Correct.
That's the thing, right? And so then you've got the freedom or the latitude when you got price that matches up with high yield. I mean, that is the aha moment, but it's when, okay, do I know that this set of products, this practice is going to be pushing it in a way that does yield well, and so therefore, yeah, the price is going to come. Even if it's $4 corn, it doesn't matter. I've got more yield, so I'll make more money out of that, right? Versus, okay, do I really need to be seeding corn at 40,000? Is 28 good enough? Is 30 good enough? It may not be the highest yield, but economically, it may be your best profit.
I mean, you've got every biological company out there promising an extra 4 to 8 bushels per acre, right? I mean, so I mean, if you add all those together,
we should be at like 700 bushel corn.
We should, exactly.
Yeah, what's your problem, Dan?
But I mean, at this point, you've really, I mean, you got to sharpen this pencil a little bit, right? And there are plenty of tools available through the Purdue Ag Econ department. I know that there are all sorts of spreadsheets and everything else that you guys have. And really have given like free access to every farmer in Indiana.
Yeah, absolutely. And just a shameless plug, right? Like we would love to, send us your yield data with your check strips in it. We get enough of those, we can start backing out, hey, what are these practices really yielding? Because I think that's hard as an individual producer getting to, we're each raising our own crops, and it's tough to get, you got coffee shop talk of what people did, but like really get down to what happened, what mattered to you. So I think like being disciplined and looking for resources that help you be disciplined, not only in your grain marketing but also in your agronomy program, so you're not blowing the top off in a year when, hey, we just need to kind of watch where the money's going.
Well, at this point of the year, it's field day season, right? And so there is just everything's out there on display. So to do our job, this same song and dance we say every year, how did it perform in the field day? How did it perform in your fields? And then to start to make the choice, okay, here's my foundation, and then what am I going to do beyond that? Is there going to be anything that's going to add on, whether it's a seed treatment that you're having to make, unfortunately, a decision now on some of these seed treatments, well, 6 months in advance, okay, was it worth that biological? Was it worth that insecticide on the soybeans? Well, probably not, right? So then you kind of work through those financial decisions as well.
So getting back to the USDA report, Chad, I mean, the takeaway for me is we either need something to really take off here for corn, soybeans. We're talking, we need the sustainable aviation fuel thing to take off. We need year-round E15 to really take off. We need something to take off, or we need some sort of big international, but we need China to step up in a big way. We need another big international market to really take off. None of these things really seem to be right around the corner. So this could take a little while, and again, I'm letting you be the doom and gloom guy.
You hear that?
Thank you.
These setups are amazing, aren't they?
I'm not going to take the fall. You're the Ag Econ guy. You're the economist.
I chose my profession.
I didn't choose. I'm just a broadcaster. You're the guy in charge of the numbers. Make them work. But in reality, that's just kind of where we're at right now. If we keep growing record crops, we don't have anywhere to take them right now.
Yeah, I mean, I'm always reminded of it's a world market, right? And so we're getting production in lots of places, and that's great. We should be really thankful for the kind of crops we're growing. The problem is that the fundamentals say they're pointing in the wrong direction. So we need to think about how do those fundamentals, and I think the one we're probably the most interested in, if we don't want to slow down supply, is we need to figure out what can we do next. So I think there's a lot of conversations around the aviation fuel, sustainable aviation fuel. And hopefully we get something like that that's going to kind of soak up some of these big crops, because we got a ways to go too. It's not like next year's crop failure kind of rights the ship.
It's interesting as we think about it agronomically. These yields have been outstanding for years, right? Again, 2016 on soy, 2018, 2020, 22, and 24, right? 23. All these years have just been phenomenal, and so agronomically, growing season, I don't hope for a lesser crop, but you kind of think that there would have been, that we might say, okay, here's an average crop, right? This soybean crop, yeah, it's a state record within Indiana. It's 7 bushels above trend, 13% above the trend. right? And that's going way back when beans came out trend. If we look at, I went to 2013 to now, so after the drought year of 2012, even that trend line, which is great, that's 0.75 bushels per acre per year. We're still 2.5 bushels above that trend. So even the last 10 years yield trend, which has been tremendous, this year is even above that. So I think that's just what we're up against. It's just been a tremendous season and able to really grow a great crop.
I mean, U.S. soybean growers, I mean, we've talked about Indiana, but U.S. soybean growers expected to increase production by 10% compared to last year. Corn still forecast for over 15 billion bushels. That is down 1% from last year, but that's still over 15 billion bushels on a national scale.
Yeah, and it's down largely just, the acreage. Acreage is down, right? The fact that I think the U.S. is down 4 million acres in corn, 250,000 in Indiana, and the overall production is down 1%, right?
Yep.
That still shows how good the crop is.
I mean, ISDA put out a release about lost farmland acres here in Indiana just between 2010 and 2022, and yet production is still up. So farmers are figuring it out. They can still produce even with less farmland. We still figure out what to do with the crop.
Well, I want to put pin Dan to the wall now. So Chad's had enough time here. He loves when I do this.
By the way, happy anniversary, Dan.
Oh,
he brought his lovely wife in today. It's his anniversary. Go ahead, pin him to the wall.
Oh,
do it.
Man. I will. No holds barred. Okay, so this is amazing looking crop. Dad would always say, it's not made until it's in the bin, right? It's not until it's out of the field. So what are some of the things that the growers need to do and concentrate on as they get this crop out? And is there anything in particular? I mean, I gave the idea about tar spot or gray leaf spot, but I mean, there was an issue that happened last year with, the crop that was already harvested, right?
Yeah, was wanting to bring that up, is mycotoxins, ear rots. That's something we've actually seen increase really over the last few years. Both Indiana's had their problems. Ohio's been worse. Michigan has been worse as well. You look at kind of the northern part of the state, northeastern part of the state, kind of down in the eastern part of the state. Both myself and Darcy Telenko have been kind of monitoring this. We've had a lot of conversations with big ethanol buyers and big livestock buyers. It's a big problem for them. And we had a lot of issues with it last year. A lot of it was particular to those northern or northeastern part of the states that were delayed in terms of harvest. One good thing that I pointed to earlier is that I think harvest might be a little bit sooner this year. That could help with some of that ear rot. But again, we've had outstanding crops, outstanding health. We have a lot of farmers that are pushing it in terms of both the management of that crop, but also the maturity of that crop. And when we see that crop, especially that delayed maturity and then that grain moisture just kind of hanging out in the mid to high 20s, that can cause issues when it comes to ear rot. One of the things to really watch for with ear rot is walking your fields. A lot of farmers like to do yield checks at this time of year as they get closer to maturity. Look at those ears, right? Is there any indication of, ear rots are pretty noticeable when you pull them. You think about some of the fusariums, the gibberella, that pink, or the trichoderma, or different ear rots out there. They all can be problems, but you see that discoloration, that mold forming on some of those ears. Those are some of the fields that we need to prioritize in terms of harvest. One of the best things you can do in terms of managing for ear rot and mycotoxin levels is just get that crop out of the field. One thing we saw this last year, is that crop, it just hangs out in the field. That grain's at a higher moisture. That fungus just continues to proliferate on that ear the longer it sits out there at that higher moisture. So if we can get it out of the field, get it dried as quick as possible. It's typically below 15%. If you can get it down to 13% moisture of that grain, that does a good job of kind of stopping that mycotoxin, and then also storing it in a cool place as well. So if it's cooler out, stored in a cooler place, it can be a little bit more challenging if the temperatures are much higher later in the season. And then you can also kind of make tweaks too, right, in terms of combine settings. There's a little bit of evidence there. Typically some of the most impacted kernels with those mycotoxins tend to be a little smaller and more shriveled. So if you can, adjust your combine settings, your fan speed, stuff like that to maybe blow some of those out, it may help a little bit. I know some farmers that actually have cleaners that they'll actually sieve that grain and clean it. That can help as well. But I had multiple conversations with farmers last year that had some of the best yields they ever had, but they took it to the elevator and they rejected it, or they had a significant dockage as well. So that can be really disheartening when you have a really good crop. So in terms of ear rots, right, foliar disease might not be a problem, but pay attention to those ear rots as we get closer and closer to maturity, as we get closer to harvest, because those can have significant economic implications even when the yield is high. I remember having a conversation with a farmer. He said, I have really bad mycotoxins, but I asked him, what were your yields this year or last year? And he said it was the best I've ever had in terms of yields. But their problem was that it just was not drying down in the northern part of the state.
So that begs the question, right? There's two good things that are going on from what I'm hearing on the corn side, right? It's advanced, and so they're able to mature quickly and hopefully mature in a way that you've got good, nice, long days that have sunshine, get that crop out and dries down. But my question on that, the flip side of that is, if this crop, it looks healthy. I mean, flat out healthy, green from top to bottom. I've yet to really see any firing yet. So with that kind of crop, high yield expectations, are we at a place where the growers are anticipating harvesting corn with green leaves, stalks? Should we be mindful of that instead of making certain that it is brown and with this vomitoxin thing? I'm just kind of curious about that.
Just pay attention to the grain moisture. I've had even our own trials where we've had some of the best yields we've had. The upper canopy's still been pretty green, but the grain moisture has been down, mid-20s.
Sure.
I think, paying attention to that grain moisture, if you have a lot of farmers have their grain moisture, Dickie Johns out there. Sample that grain, watch that moisture. That's a challenge, and Darcy and myself have had these conversations. We're getting ready to ramp up a lot of our ear rot research here in the coming years, and the question is that we often see is that with nitrogen and some of the fungicides, and that we're pushing this crop, and then also some of the maturity, right? Some of the farmers, northern part of the state that might push 112 day. I've talked to some that tried to push 114 day in the northern part of the state. And what we saw is that it's basically maintaining that crop's health. It's still going, right? And that's a good thing for grain fill, and that's a good thing for yield, is that we want that. But on the flip side of that, are we also maybe driving some of those ear rots where that crop is just staying too healthy too long, where it could potentially that moisture, we often see it with higher nitrogen rates, see it in a lot of our fungicide work. You see it in both those inputs where actually that moisture tends to be a little bit higher at harvest, where when you're harvesting that crop, just because of that health of that crop. So
that microclimate effect, right? Is really what you're asking. Because in the ear rot story, it's not healthy, right? I hear that. I was like, it's not healthy though. There's ear rots, but it's really about there's green leaves that are healthy, but then creating a micro environment, right? That's got that humidity there.
Green leaves, and then it's also when you have that kind of extended grain fill, it just is maintaining the moisture in that grain. And that's a big thing with a lot of these mycotoxins. When you have the high moisture in that grain, it's going to continue to proliferate.
It's that condition that it really likes.
Yep, exactly. So that's, we're hopefully, starting next year. One thing I really want to start tackling on this question is the harvest timing question. We have a lot of questions, in terms of the mycotoxins, but also the phantom yield loss, right? That's a big topic for a lot of farmers. I don't like having farmers wait till 17, 18, 17, 16% moisture, because you can have mycotoxin issues. You can have a lot of ear drop and butt shelling.
About the ear drop on the head and just shelling
issues.
Out like that.
So still try and target the mid. I like that mid 25% in there. There's some farmers. There's some places that'll take 30% corn as well. Big proponent on get that corn out of there, and that can help with some of the mycotoxin issues, but also help with lodging issues, harvest losses.
Such a balance, all right, because I'm thinking about the amount of gas that you have to just to dry that down, right?
It's a challenge, right? Do we get it out, dry it, or do we let it wait? And we have these other risks. So there's a lot of
and you
back
wonder
and
why
forth.
we got more growers growing soybeans when you got all this to worry about on the corn side. Really.
And see, I'm thinking that it's probably about time for us to end this podcast, because I'm worried about the same thing. Me staying healthy too long. I've got to go get more food, fried food here at the state fair.
You're saying the food around here is not healthy?
Well, some of it is. It's not typically what I target when I'm around. Moderation.
I did
yeah.
see the fried Oreo stand right out back here.
Amen.
Yeah.
So as we wrap up here today, we'll get some final thoughts. Again, Chad, thank you for joining us here on the Purdue Crop Chat. And just out of curiosity, as a recovering farmer, I'm curious your thoughts. After a report like what we get from USDA every month, this big one here in August. As a farmer, and maybe you're a little different because again your midlife crisis led you to become an ag economist. But how much do you pay attention to these reports from USDA? How much do farmers really clue into these, other than, a report's coming from USDA, the market's going to go up or down based on this?
I would guess that most farmers are pretty tuned in.
Okay.
Just from the standpoint of kind of knowing, I think there's a pretty solid understanding of fundamentals, where we're going to be, and what's the opportunity, right? If the fundamentals are pushing price down, and that's a strong push down, you're going to see it in this report. So I think that's probably what they're looking. How strong are the forces that are pushing price? So this is a big one.
Yep.
I would say most farmers are tuned in.
Yeah, August, the August report especially tends to really push on it one way or another, and this year, the big push down.
Yep.
So, Shaun, your thoughts here?
Yeah. So again, we've got a great report that came out. I think the yield potential is certainly there, probably more so than what we've had, and even in these other years that we've broke records. This crop is advanced as I've seen. The potential is certainly there. We do need the moisture to finish it out, right? So I think hopefully get some rains. Let's go ahead. We got some markets that are a little bit lower price, so let's get the yield that we can. Hopefully the rains will help out with that. But there's still management to be had. So I was razzing on Dan a little bit about the corn and everything and getting that crop out. But soybeans, I mean, that's a frustrating beast too when you look at harvest, right? I mean, you think about getting out there, you get paid at a water weight at 13% moisture, and then you get years that you're harvesting 10%. You've lost out 3% water weight on a price that's already kind of subpar. So let's get our combines ready. And with a crop that, if it has adequate moisture and the health that it sees, it's not too uncommon for us to have green stem soybeans that we need to be cutting, and the grain moisture, just like you talked about, Dan, it's right there at 14%. So make sure the combine's tuned for that. The rotary combines, they can chew through that. Some of the older ones have a little harder time, but I dare say those years that we have the green stem in this way, it's often associated with we got higher yielding beans.
There's a lot of times I can get the combine out a lot sooner than Shaun during the day.
Oh, I thought he was going to say there are a lot of times that I can get it to rain because of how well I dance. What song do we need to put on? His wife is out here. What song is it?
I still have the video. I still have the video from 2 years ago proving this.
What's the best song? Is it is it the Isley Brothers? Is it Lil Jon? What do we need to put on?
No, it's simply Dancing Queen.
It's ABBA is what we need. Okay.
It is ABBA, quite literally. I have the video. I can pull it back.
All right.
Yeah, so it is. We mentioned is my anniversary. You know, and what better way to celebrate your anniversary than bring your wife to a Hoosier Ag Today Purdue Crop Chat podcast recording?
Absolutely.
So,
I've never done it. So
it's unique.
Yeah.
It's unique. That's for sure.
There is a donation for Ashley at GoFundMe.
Yep. But for this, echo what Shaun said in terms of the soybean crop with the corn crop, very similar, right? If we can catch a little bit more moisture, we're getting close, but there's still a lot that can swing or change that yield. If we can catch some of these moisture coming, there's a chance, I think, later this week, if we can catch some of that around the state, as we get into that dent, just help that grain fill. I hope harvest is timely, right? We talk a lot about what we should watch for in terms of harvest. This crop is healthy. It looks good. It's just whether or not we can finish it off. And then, be mindful, right? As you're doing those yield checks, pulling ears. I love pulling ears this time of year. Farmers love pulling ears this time of year. But look at those ears, right? Look at, the health of the ears. Pay attention to the moisture, right? Checking that moisture, looking for ear rots, prioritizing fields. Hey, maybe this field, we had some farmers that, when that Hurricane Beryl came through and some of that rainfall, they had some root lodging going on. We had some root lodging. A lot of those fields, they had the goosenecking. They recovered pretty well, but those stalks probably a little bit weaker. So we probably need to prioritize those fields as well. Anything, I would say walking fields at harvest, just simple pushing on that crop, walking perpendicular through your rows, pushing on that crop, whether or not it's going to fall over real quickly. Hey, I need to prioritize this field and this field, or maybe I have some ear rot showing up and maybe need to prioritize these fields. So there's still a lot of work to be had, still a lot of decisions to be had, and still a lot of things to watch as we get close to harvest. But things look good right now, so it's just whether or not we can finish it off.
It's Ashley, right? Ashley, here's the plan for the rest of the day, okay? Pork tent right over there, all right? The glass barn right next door so he can learn a few things about soybeans. He needs to, right, Shaun?
He does.
Okay.
He does. He
So
hasn't
shout
learned
out.
Clearly, I'm not doing my job. He
Clearly.
hasn't learned from me.
Clearly. So we can go there. Shout out to our sponsor, the Indiana Soybean Alliance, and the Indiana Corn Marketing Council. Okay, so there's that plan, and then there's St. Elmo's and Ruth's Chris downtown. So there you go. Okay, pull out that wallet. Okay.
Yep.
Get it moving. Happy anniversary. Happy anniversary.
Thank you.
Yeah. And that does it for this edition of the Purdue Crop Chat. We thank you for joining us, and we really thank Andy and CJ being here for the live stream. And join us again here in a little while. We're going to be live streaming the Lieutenant Governor's debate, so join us for that as well. Dan, Shaun, Chad, thank you. Another Purdue Crop Chat in the books. We'll do this back again in West Lafayette here in a little while. So.
I expect the tie in West Lafayette. Okay, new standard. You have elevated this podcast, so I want to see it.
It might be on with a hoodie, but I'll bring the tie.
The fact that you've taken a picture of us with those hats, we're going to get the same thing. Thanks, Eric.
This has been the Purdue Crop Chat from Hoosier Ag Today. Thanks for joining us.